You can go ahead and turn, well, we're going to be in two different books today, so it's a little difficult, but I want to talk about the faith that inspires. When we think about the story of giants in the Bible, usually we think of the story of David and Goliath, but there's actually multiple giants mentioned in the Bible. David was not the only one who slayed a giant, but he was one who inspired others to take up the mantle and also slay giants. Did I have this on? Oh, yep, I do. Today's goal is that every one of God's people should have a faith that they can use, that God can use to inspire others for these three reasons. First, we'll talk about Joshua and Caleb, their faith that inspired Israel to defeat giants. Next, we'll talk about David's faith that led him to face a giant alone. And then third, we'll talk about David's faith that inspired others to fight the giants after he could no longer do so. So let's talk about first Joshua and Caleb and the giants that they had to face. Now we know the story of Moses, how he went into Egypt as God had commanded him to do, and he told the Egyptians, let my people go, God's people. And eventually, after 10 plagues and a lot of heartache, they were able to leave the land of Egypt. But for whatever reason, God didn't immediately put them in the land of Canaan, what we would know now as the land of Israel. And instead, they were kind of in the wilderness for a little while. They got the 10 Commandments. They were given the law. And all of this was in preparation so that they had everything that they needed as they were entering the land of Israel. But before they entered, they decided to send 12 spies. We don't know the names of all 12, but we know 2 of their names was Caleb and Joshua. And when they enter into the land, they'd start to notice, yes, this place is a place flowing with milk and honey. Now, that doesn't mean that the rivers were made of milk or honey. What it means is that this place is bountiful, right? There's so much. It's overflowing with harvest of like the honey from the bees and the milk from the cows. So Joshua and Caleb, they were excited about this, but the other 10 spies, they were discouraged because there was giants in the land. And they said their cities are walled. We can't penetrate them. Their people are huge. Now listen to this. Nevertheless, the people be strong. This is Numbers chapter 13, verse 28, and then we'll skip on to 30 to 31, and then we'll skip to verse 33. I just can't fit it all on one slide. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. Now later on it'll explain to us the children of Anak are the children of the giants. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, we be not able to go up against the people, right? They're saying the opposite of what Caleb's saying. And we'll figure out in a little bit that Caleb, the reason why he has this confidence is not a confidence in himself or even in Israel. It's a confidence in the God who can overcome any enemy that they have. But yet the people, you can see they don't have a confidence in God like Caleb has. As we are well able to overcome it, but they said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Now, I don't know that these giants were really that big in the sense that they were bigger than this building to where I would look like a grasshopper to them. Chances are the fear had made them see the giants with even bigger eyes. Now, we know Goliath, for example, he was around 10 foot. The Bible says that they was about, their measurements are different than our measurements. It's kind of an inconsistent measuring system, so it's a little difficult to know. But he was about 9'10", so about 3 or 4 foot taller than me, and that's huge. But sometimes when we are afraid, our fear makes us exaggerate things. Has anyone ever been walking in the woods or walking at night and you see something run by you? Yeah. Even though nothing was there, your brain will literally play tricks on you because your brain wants you to be scared in scary situations. So you will literally see things go through your eyesight and it will spook you because your brain wants you to be in fight or flight mode even though there was nothing there, because your brain thinks better to be scared and prepared, right, than to not be prepared. And unfortunately, this was happening to the other 10 spies. They looked at these giants and they said, we are so small compared to them. They're like, we feel like we're grasshoppers to them. Now, again, chances are they weren't that big. But the point is, fear has a way of exaggerating what we're afraid of. And they looked at these giants and they said, we can't overcome them. And they were right. They could not overcome them. In fact, some of them try and they die doing it. But who could overcome these giants? Not Israel. God could overcome these giants. So here they were focusing not on God's ability, they were focusing on their ability. How many times do we enter a situation and we look at it and we say, there's no way I can do this, and you're absolutely right. God can, though. When we, through whatever situation it is, look at the situation as what can God do in this situation, not what can I do in this situation. In fact, sometimes God will put you in situations that you can't handle so that He is the one you have to rely on to handle it for you. Whether it's finances or relationships or even your health and your safety, God puts us in situations sometimes that we have to trust Him. And Caleb did, but the others did not. Skip on to Numbers chapter 14, verse 6 through 8. Should be pretty close to chapter 13. Should be the next chapter, right? I know math, right? And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. This was a way of showing torment, of sorrow, usually sorrow for the loss of something. But in this case, it's almost like a prophetic loss, right? They understand that this is a bad thing that's happening. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it, it's an exceeding good land. And if the Lord delight in us, then He will bring us into this land and give it to us, right? Just like Jonathan, remember when we studied the passage where Jonathan, there's an army that's so huge, they stopped counting after thousands and 30, 40,000 people. They're like, we're done counting. And Jonathan, he grabs one person with him and says, hey, let's go attack them, right? He says, if the Lord is with us, it doesn't matter how many of us there are. As long as the Lord is with us, He can prevail. And Joshua and Caleb, they're saying the same thing, saying, don't look at how big they are. Don't look at their walled cities. The land is great. This is the land that the Lord has promised us. And if He is with us, then He will deliver them into our hands. So the only factor that matters is God with us. And Joshua and Caleb believed that He was. They said, only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defenses is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to come into situations where you're going to notice, as I said earlier, you can't do it. But the only factor that matters is God with you? Is this part of God's plan? If it is part of God's plan, it's going to happen. But the children of Israel, they started listening to the 10 spies. In fact, after this, it says they wanted to kill Joshua and Caleb, all for just trying to trying to reason with them and say, let's go into the land. We can do this with God's help. And they're saying, we don't want to. We'd rather go back to Egypt, right? They've been wandering in the wilderness for a little while. And they've started realizing that, hey, even though we were slaves in Egypt, we still had cucumbers, which I don't even like cucumbers. We still had fish. We still had this food. We had that food. They started looking at the things that they had while in captivity and saying, it's better than going in there and dying to those giants. Caleb and Joshua, they tried to reason with the people. Moses and Aaron, they tried to reason with them. And the people were so set on going back to Egypt and not going to the land of Israel. They were even willing to get rid of Moses and Aaron and get new leaders. But of course, God intervened in the situation, and He was hot, steaming mad. Because this was not just a fear, a random fear. This was a lack of confidence in the God who had defeated, at that time, probably the greatest kingdom in the land, Egypt. And He did it without a single Israelite doing anything, right? Now, of course, you could say Moses did something, but Moses was simply an instrument for God to use. God turned the water into blood. God turned the sky black. God sent fire from heaven. God sent plagues, all these things on the Egyptians, and the Israelites didn't have to do anything. And yet here they are standing at the precipice of something great, something that God has promised to them, and they say, I don't think we're going to do that. And God is upset with them. So he says, listen, this is what's going to happen. You're not going there anymore. You're going to go to the wilderness and you're going to think about what you did, right? Go to your room. And he said, you're going to stay there for 40 years. Now, 40 years in the wilderness was a death sentence for that entire generation. Now, there may have been young children who were able to grow up and still live during this time, but most of the adults were going to die before they ever got to go into the land of Israel. And he said that the only two exceptions he was going to give was Joshua and Caleb, because they were the ones who believed in him. Now, Moses and Aaron, they probably believed in him too, but different reasons. Moses was not able to go into the land of Israel. He was able to see it, but he ended up dying on that mountain as God had said he would. But anyway, so the entire generation, because of their rebellion, because of their lack of faith, God would not let them enter into the promised land. And some of them decide, hey, never mind, we're sorry, we'll go. And God said, you can go, but I'm not going to be with you, right? You had your chance. And some of them, they did end up going to the land of Israel, and they died. They were killed by the inhabitants because God was not with them. They were absolutely right. They could not defeat the enemies in the land of Canaan, but God couldn't. Because God wasn't with them anymore, they couldn't defeat them. But look, fast forward the clock to Joshua chapter 11, verse 21 through 22. Moses has already died. Joshua is his successor, and he is leading the children of Israel into the land of Canaan. And army after army after army, they've defeated in miraculous ways. No one has been able to stand against them except for one time we talked about it this morning, and that's because God had stopped being with them very, very briefly. But once they fixed the problem, God joined them again, and they continued to defeat every army they came up against. In Joshua chapter 11, verse 21 through 22, it says, and at that time came Joshua and cut off the Anakims, right? The sons of Anak were the giants. From the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. There were none of the Anakims left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in Gaza and Gath and in Ashdod there remained. Ironically, those would later become the cities of the Philistines. So you know the story of David and Goliath. There was still a giant, apparently. So Joshua, he had inspired this new generation. The previous generation had already died in the wilderness, but now this new generation, the children of Israel had not even been probably present during the parting of the Red Sea, present during the 10 plagues that happened. This is a new generation, yet Joshua and Caleb, through God's help, they are able to inspire this new generation to face the giants that the previous generation would not face. And they are winning each and every battle, and they push them back so far that the only giants left are in the land that would eventually become known as the land of the Philistines. And Caleb, the other guy who was a spy who also reported good things, drove thence the three sons of Anak, Sheshai and Ahaman and Talmai, the children of Anak. And if you read the book of Numbers, these were the three giants who the children of Israel were most afraid of. They're mentioned by name in the book of Numbers. And here's Caleb doing what he said they could do a generation ago. And now he's an old man. He's probably in his 70s or 80s. He's an old man fighting these battles. But he still has the confidence, not in his abilities, but in God. And he's able to defeat the giants. Now, not everyone knows those stories because usually, when we think of the giants, we think of David and Goliath. And I don't know how tall these giants were. Maybe Goliath was very, very tall in comparison to them. We know from one story, it doesn't say the height of the person, but it says his bed was like 12 foot long. So we know there could be some that were even taller than Goliath. But all we know is that these men looked at the situation and said, our God can, even if we can't. So they could trust God that way. All right, let's move on to the story of David. And most of you already know the story of David. It's kind of a long chapter, so we're going to have to jump through it a little bit. But 1 Samuel chapter 17, I believe. Yes. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, it says, and there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath. Now let's rewind a little bit. It says, Joshua drove them all out, only in Gaza and Gath and in Ashdod there remained. So this was probably one of the giants left over who became a Philistine later on. It said, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. And again, this is a measurement we don't use anymore. It's based on kind of a a difficult measurement to measure, but it would be about 9 foot 10 inches, so almost 10 foot tall. And the Israelites, I don't know what they were like back then, but I know nowadays they tend to be pretty short, right? I was in Israel for a while, and most of them usually came to about here to me. So they're not super tall people, and yet this person is almost twice my height. He's almost 10 foot tall. And usually when we see people who are abnormally tall, we think of dangly people, right? Really tall, weak people who they may have gigantism or something. Even the tallest person in the world, how tall is he? Like 8 foot or something like that. And he has to walk with a cane because he outgrew his body. But the Bible is going to go through great pains to tell us this was no weakling. Right? It says he had a helmet of bronze on his head. Now, back then, the Philistines, they didn't usually wear helmets of metal. It was probably going to be too heavy, and it was probably going to hurt. But this person, and plus it was just going to be heavy. But yet he was wearing a helmet of bronze on his head, likely to intimidate. And he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. This would have been over 100 pounds. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. And the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam. Now, this may be a situation where at the end of the spear, right before the tip, there may have been kind of like a big ball to kind of add weight so that when he swung it, it was almost like an axe, where usually with spears you poke, right? But in this case, he could swing that thing, and the weight would cause momentum to where anyone he hit, it would just slice him in half. So anyways, it was a big deal. It says the javelin and the shaft of spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead was weighed 600 shekels of iron. This would have been around 27 pounds. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were much afraid. And we might think, especially those of you who work out, 27 pounds, that's not too bad. Well, that's the tip of it. I don't know how much the rest of it weighed. It may have weighed even more. But if I was to hold a bar, like a weight bar, that would probably be approximately the weight of this thing, so about 45 pounds maybe. I can't swing that thing very effectively. So the fact that he was able to wield this thing would be both intimidating, but also prove how strong he was. It says, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were much afraid. So we start to see history repeating itself. When the 10 spies or 12 spies went into the land of Israel, they saw the giants. And they reported this. 10 of them reported saying, we can't do this. And they were right, but God could. And yet the people feared the giants in the land, and now Israel is doing it again. Even though they've heard these stories of Joshua and Caleb who defeated the giants before, they are afraid to fight Goliath. Maybe he was bigger than most, but this is a new generation, and each generation needs someone to inspire them. Hopefully, God can be the one to inspire them, but sometimes God sends people like David, people like Joshua, people like Caleb to inspire a fearful generation to take up the courage, not in Joshua, Caleb, David, or anyone else, but in God, and take that courage. So they needed someone to inspire them. Now, David, he shows up to the battle not to fight. He wasn't supposed to fight, but he's at the battle, and everyone's quaking in fear about this giant. This giant, he's saying mean things about Israel. He's saying mean things about God. He's shouting it over, knowing that nobody's brave enough to come and fight him. And this is blasphemous for Goliath to do, because he's speaking ill of God, but this is blasphemous of the people, because they're proving Goliath's point. They are afraid of Goliath because to them, Goliath looks bigger than their God. And that's pretty upsetting, right? So David looks at the situation. He's thinking, why has no one fought him? Why has no one taken him down yet? And David seems to have zero fear about this Goliath. He says, for who is this uncircumcised Philistine? This is in verse 26. That he should defy the armies of the living God. In verse 32, it says, skip on down to where he's talking to Saul. And David said to Saul, the king, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. So David is saying, don't let anyone be scared anymore. I'll go fight him. And David, it does describe him as a mighty warrior. Even before this, sometimes we like to depict David as this weakling who could barely walk or something like that. But David, it says he was a mighty man. He may have been small in his family, but he was mighty in the eyes of God. And all this assembly, skip on to verse 47. So here he's talking to Israel, here he's talking to Saul, and here he's talking to Goliath. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth, not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you, Goliath, into our hands. So Goliath is talking smack to David, thinking, this is terrible, this is so silly. Why would you send out a boy to fight me? And yet David's thinking, well, first off, he's taller than everyone, so what did it matter? But you would almost imagine that Saul himself, the man who's the tallest man in Israel, would go up to fight Goliath, but he doesn't. And we might think, what about Jonathan? Where was Jonathan? I don't know where Jonathan was. It could be, when we read earlier the story about a month ago, where Jonathan boldly went into battle against an uncountable army. He believed that God could deliver them into his hands regardless of how many people there were. Surely that same Jonathan would not be afraid of the giants. And maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was somewhere else. Maybe Saul wouldn't let him fight. Or maybe he was also afraid. You see, our faith is not in Jonathan. Our faith is not in Daniel. Our faith is not in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Our faith is in the same God who inspired them to do great things. But sometimes our spiritual life, we have our highs and we have our lows, right? David, for example, King David, he did wonderful things for the Lord, but he also did a lot of dumb things for himself. So we don't know where Jonathan was. Maybe, again, he wasn't there. I like to think he wasn't there. But the point is, David was the only one there who was willing to fight Goliath. And David admits it's not through his power that he's going to be able to defeat him. It said the battle is the Lord's. He will give you into our hands. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 48 through 50, it says, "And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine." David's not stuttering back, right? He's not spooked. He's excited about this. He's pumped. He's ready to go. And he runs towards Goliath. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead. And he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone and smote the Philistine and slew him. And later he cuts off his head, so Goliath is really dead by that point. But sometimes we look at this and we think, wow, he killed him with a kid's toy, right? A slingshot. But the truth is, slingshots, or it wasn't like, it was, right? These were actual weapons that Israel used. In fact, we talked a little bit about this morning, where I believe it was the tribe of Benjamin. There was a civil war during the time of the judges, and the Benjamites, they actually used slings to defeat Israel multiple times. So this was actually a weapon of warfare, but that does not make this story any less miraculous, right? We might think David was a little tiny boy. He had his little tiny toy, and he slew a giant. Isn't that great? Regardless of if he was a gigantic person with a big weapon, it doesn't matter. The point is the battle belonged to the Lord. And there are going to be times in your life where you're looking for miraculous ways in which God's going to deliver you. And sometimes God does deliver you in miraculous ways. Sometimes God delivers you in expected ways. And that's no less miraculous. There was a time when, I've told this story many times, where I wanted to go to Bible college, and I was going to Hutchinson Community College, and I had been sleeping in my car because I just couldn't pay for the gas. Gas was expensive back then. Not quite as expensive as it is now, but it was Barack Obama's era, and gas was still up there, about $3.20 a gallon. And I just couldn't afford to pay for gas because I had sports afterwards, so I couldn't go to work to make more money. And I was driving home one day from a Bible study. I thought about sleeping in my car, but I was tired, which that's what you do when you sleep. But I'm like, I'm just going to go home. And I went to the lake. I swung by the dam, Cheney Dam, and I was just praying. I said, God, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to keep relying on my ability to provide for myself. So I told God, I said, God, from now on, I'm just going to trust you to provide for my needs. I'm going to do what I think you want me to do and just trust you with the rest. When I got home, I believe it was that very same night, someone had written a check for $10,000 to pay for my Bible college. And for me, that's a big deal, right? That was a miracle in my eyes. And that helped me pay for the entire first year of Bible college. But no one ever donated after that. Well, what's going on? But from that year on, that was my bachelor's degree. I went on to receive, that bachelor's degree, a master's, and multiple degrees debt-free, even though that was just one time when God provided that 10,000. Every time I had a bill, God provided for it, whether it was through me working or something like that. And it was no less miraculous than the 10,000. Does that make sense? So you might be looking at your life and saying, well, God's never done something like that for me. Yes, he has. He may have done it through different means. He provided it all as one big bulk. But every day you wake up, he's provided every breath in your lungs, every beat of your heart, every step that you take, every moment you have in this life is a gift from God. God has been providing for you, whether in expected ways or unexpected ways. God is doing that. And whether David was a weakling with a toy slaying Goliath, or David was a mighty warrior with a sling, a weapon of warfare, defeating Goliath, the result is the same. God delivered Goliath into the hands of David. And David's faith inspired others. Many of you probably don't know this story, but if you continue to read on past the story of David and Goliath, David eventually becomes king of Israel. And the giants are not all gone. Goliath was only one of the giants that was still left over. And as you can imagine, the giants don't like David very much. The Philistines don't like David very much. And they go to battle against David. And David, he's still this warrior. He still wants to fight. He's still one of the guys, right? So he's in the battle. And the Philistines find out that he's in the battle. They send their troops to that spot to try to overwhelm him. And David is overwhelmed. And he starts falling. He's faltering. He's probably older at this point. He wasn't king until he was pretty much an older person. And he's faltering, and one of his mighty men have to come in and defend him from one of the giants, and he actually slays the giant that's determined to kill David, and it was one of his men that slayed him. Let's go ahead and read it. This is 2 Samuel chapter 21, verse 15 through 17. I guess it's 3 books of the Bible that we're going through. I'm sorry. So 2 Samuel 21. It says, moreover, the Philistines had yet war again with Israel, and David went down, and his servants with him, and fought against the Philistines. And David waxed faint, right? He was getting tired. He was getting overwhelmed. And Ishbi-Benob, which was one of the sons of the giants, the weight of whose spear weighed 300 shekels. Now, Goliath's spear weighed 600 shekels, so this was not the same weight. He may not have been as big, or maybe he just didn't have as big of a weapon. We don't know. But anyways, this was still a big person. 300 shekels of brass in weight. He, being girded with a new sword, thought to have slain David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, succored him and smote the Philistine and killed him. Then the men of David sware unto him, saying, thou shalt go no more out with us to battle, that thou quench not the light of Israel. In other words, the men of David, they had been so inspired by David when he had slayed his own giant. He had a band of men come alongside of him. Even when Saul was trying to kill David, he still had these mighty men who were like, we're with you, David. And now, as David is king, he's fighting, and he's about to die. He's inspired his men to fight these giants that at one point the children of Israel back in Joshua's day had said we can't do it. Even in David's day they said we couldn't do it. But now they are inspired to fight the battle, and they're looking at David and says, you shouldn't be fighting with us anymore, right? You're getting kind of old. They want to kill you. They're not really after us necessarily. You're a bigger target. He says we don't want the light in Israel to die out, right? We don't want what has been inspiring us, what has been leading us. We don't want that to go out. So they asked David not to fight anymore, that they would fight for him. And a good leader, we talked about this morning, we've been going through 1 Samuel. The children of Israel, they asked for a king. They had been having judges who were kind of like kings, but not exactly. And Samuel was the last judge in Israel. And they came to him and they said, we don't want judges anymore. We want a king to rule over us. And Samuel tells them, he says, listen, the king that you want, the king you think is going to fight your battles, what he's going to do is he's going to take your sons to fight the battles for him. He's going to take your daughters. He's going to take your land. He's going to take your sheep. Because that's what eventually kings would end up doing. But David wasn't someone who took. He was someone who inspired. His men willingly fought for him, willingly, even again, when Saul was trying to kill him, the actual king, he still had loyal followers. And they're saying, David, we will fight the battles for you. So he inspired them. If you continue on in chapter 21, verse 18 through 19, it says, and it came to pass after this that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbecai the Hushathite slew Saph, which was one of the sons of the giants. And there was again a battle in Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jair-Oregim, a Bethlehemite, slew the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, the staff of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Now, if you look in the King James Version, whatever translation you have, it may be different from this, but in the King James Version, it has the brother of as italicized, which basically means it wasn't in the original. At least the copy that they had, it didn't include this. So this seems pretty significant, right? So when you're translating from one language to another, not every word translates into one word, right? It has an equivalent word. So sometimes when the King James Version, when they're translating, or any version of English translation, when they're translating, they have to kind of add some words to make the sentence make sense in English, because we don't speak the same way that they would have spoken. So they'll italicize it to show people, hey, this wasn't in the original. But this seems pretty significant, right? Because if you get rid of the italicized word, it says, Elhanan slew Goliath the Gittite, the staff of whose spear was like a weaver's beam, which is exactly how it describes Goliath. So some people have speculated, what is this talking about? Is Elhanan another name for David? It's just describing the different giants that they slew? Or is this someone else who slew Goliath? In which case, why would that contradict the previous story where it says David slew Goliath? Well, if we read 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5, Chronicles is a big repeat of 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. So kind of like the Gospels. You remember when we were going through the Gospels last year, we talked about how they complement one another. Where one lacks details, the other one makes up for. Well, Chronicles kind of does that when it comes to 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. And so the same situation. And there was war again with the Philistines. And Elhanan, the son of Jair, slew Lahmi, the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, whose spear staff was like a weaver's beam. So again, the King James Version, either they believe that this may have been missing. In other words, someone who copied it later, they may have forgotten to put that. Or the author of 2 Samuel, they just assumed that they would know this was the brother, not actually Goliath. But whatever reason, they just inputted this so that we weren't confused. Because again, 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5 clarifies that this was Lahmi, the brother of Goliath, not Goliath himself. But anyways, the point remains the same. David's men are inspired to slay the giants that were once feared by the people. And there was yet a battle in Gath, where was a man of great stature. It doesn't say how tall he was, but apparently he was tall, that had on every hand 6 fingers and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number. Now, we might look at this and say that's kind of an odd thing to describe. Why does it matter how many fingers and toes he has? Well, in the ancient Near East, they were a little more superstitious than we are, and they believed that depending on the mutation, such as extra fingers, it was a bad omen or a good omen, right? It meant if, for example, it was on the right hand, it may mean that you can't be defeated. If it was on the left hand, it meant you're going to be cursed. I don't know what it meant for all of them, right? Left and right. But it meant different things depending on where your fingers were. So the Bible is making it very clear. It didn't matter what their superstitions were. God was going to defeat any giant that came in the path of Israel because God was with them. And he also was born to the giants. And when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimeah, the brother of David, slew him. These four were born of the giants in Gath and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. So we can look at this story, and we're already done. We can look at this story and see Joshua and Caleb, these people who had so much faith in God that they wanted everyone in Israel to understand we can defeat them, not through our power, but through the power of God. He can deliver them into our hands. But unfortunately, that generation did not listen to them, and that generation passed in the wilderness. But the next generation, a new generation, were ready to obey God, and God did great things through them. God defeated every giant that came in their wake. They were able to push them all the way back to Gath and Ashdod and Gaza, which Israel is still struggling with Gaza to this day. I don't know if there are giants there. But anyways, so God had pushed them back. And by the time of David, the giants who were not slain, who were still apparently in the land, which were hundreds of years later, so probably not the same giants, but maybe descendants of them, God was able to inspire a David to stand up when no one else would. When everyone else quaked in fear, including Saul himself, the tallest man in Israel, David was able to stand up and say, you don't have to be afraid. I'll take care of this. The Lord has delivered him into our hands. David wasn't taking credit. He was giving credit to God. And because of his faith in God, he could boldly attack this Philistine, this giant, who, by the way, had a shield bearer. So, in other words, David wasn't even just attacking one person. Technically, he was attacking two people, which is probably why he went for the head, right? The shield bearer couldn't reach. But anyways, so David was able to not just defeat his own giants, but inspire others to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, God is going to send in every generation Joshuas and Calebs and Davids and others like that who are here to inspire us, not to follow them, but to follow the God who inspires their heart, who gives them this burning fire in their life. Why can't that person be you, right? Could you have that faith like Joshua, like Caleb, like David, where others look at it and say, wow, I want that same kind of faith. I want that same kind of confidence. Now, I'm not saying go find a tall person and hit him in the head, right? That might inspire some jail time. But what I am saying is no matter what the situation is, understand that God is with you. And when you have that understanding, when you have that confidence, people will notice. I remember, and I've talked about this before, when my sister passed away through suicide, I was fairly young. I think I was about 14 years old. And it was, of course, hard on my family, and some of them turned to bad things. And me and my older brother, Chris, we had really grown closer together after that situation. We grew closer to the Lord as well. And I was able to pray with people. In fact, the day that my sister died, it was on a Sunday. I was at church when it happened. In fact, my whole family was at church. That's how she was able to do it. And when I got home, of course, I found my sister, and it was a bad story. But anyways, that day I thought, it's Sunday. I'm going back to church. It was youth group. We had youth group on Sunday evenings. And I knew some people knew about my sister's death because they kept texting us. But I didn't know the whole church knew. And I came back to church that day. I walked because my family, they're still mourning. And I was mourning too, but I was trying to put on a strong faith too, I suppose. And I walked from my house, which is over on Lincoln Street, all the way to the church. And I didn't know people had known. And I got there, and everyone's just weeping and crying. And apparently they were having a prayer session. And I just felt like in my darkest times, I needed to go to church. And I remember Miss Elda, she came and she prayed with me, and many of you guys did, came and prayed with me. And after that experience, years later, people would come to me and say, you know, Daniel, how did you do it, right? How did you overcome that sadness? How did you overcome that obstacle? And I could point them to God, right? I could say I could go with confidence knowing that God was, I didn't know how he was going to do something good out of this situation, but I could go with confidence knowing that God was still with me, that God was still working something for good. And I was able to talk people out of suicide and able to help those who, their families had committed suicide, all because of this terrible situation. And maybe that's not your situation. I hope not. But you're going to go through times in your life where something bad's going to happen. Maybe you lose your job. Maybe you lose a loved one. Maybe your own safety is at risk. And when you go through those times of trials and you can still say, God is good, God is still with me, it's going to inspire people. Let's say your boss, for example, comes to you and says, hey, you know, you're a great worker, but we just can't afford to keep you around. We're going to have to fire you. And you say, that's okay. God still got this. You think that won't touch your boss's heart? When you can go through times of trial and people are looking at you thinking, wow, I feel so bad for the person, you can say, that's okay. God still got this. It can inspire people. And sometimes God will bring you through those terrible times so you can have an opportunity to do what's right. I think of Jacob, for example. He's often been used as an inspirational story where he went through a hard time, but he came out of it and he looked back and said, God was with me. And God can use each and every one of those times. So every one of God's people should have a faith that God can use to inspire others for these three reasons. Joshua and Caleb's faith inspired Israel to defeat giants. David's faith led him to face a giant alone, and David's faith inspired others to fight the giants after he could not. God is going to raise up a generation or someone within this generation to inspire us, not to follow them. If someone's trying to inspire you to follow them, they're probably not the person, right? But they're going to inspire us to follow God. We have a choice like the children of Israel had when Joshua was trying to tell them, God's got this. Will we be inspired? Will we let God touch our hearts? Or will we quake in fear like the children of Israel did? All right, let's go ahead and pray. Dear God, I want to thank you for this day. Thank you for an opportunity to dive into your word, Lord. It's an amazing thing to see what you've done. And Lord, we look at these major feats and we think, wow, what a miracle. But the truth is, Lord, you're doing miracles every single day. They're just so common, we think they're natural. We think that it's just an inevitability that we'll wake up every morning. We think that it's an inevitability that you'll provide for us. We think it's an inevitability that our jobs will stay secure. But yet each and every day, you're the one doing it all. You're not just the great creator of the universe. You are the sustainer. We are in your hands, Lord. And Lord, when we forget that, we start to fear because we start to look at our own abilities, saying, how can we make things work out? How can we do it on our own? But really, Lord, we should turn to you as the one who does it all. Lord, you've gained victories over the battles that we're yet to come to yet. And Lord, I pray that we would lean on you in everything that we do, and that through our faith in you, we would inspire others to have a similar faith. Lord, we love you, we praise you, we thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.